stationary to get the value out of their builds or to ensure their team's point generation, while DPS and roamers like to be aggressive and progress the map by getting the enemy away from those objectives either through kills or pressuring them off. However, not all plays can be made in ideal situations, and you may be forced to sometimes take bad matchups and make inefficient rotations. But what matters more than the build or role you are playing is how you play it. Not all builds are stuck to a strict role or have scripted rotations. Often you will play many different roles in a match, but most builds are optimized toward a role, so your understanding of the entire system of roles and rotations will allow you to overcome these difficult situations or matches where you aren't provided ideal environment for your build or role. You can perform any role on any class, but some classes will have better options for playing that role, and some builds can play multiple roles or more specific roles than the 4 general ones, but just learning these will allow you to go from there. Team compositions may be stronger or weaker against a specific playstyle or other combinations of compositions, so it's usually best to have a good balance of these roles within your team to avoid being easily countered. For example, if the enemy team is all roamers and duelists, then you just play for 2 points and stick together so that they can't pick off targets alone. If the enemy team is all supports and DPS, then it's awkward for them to rotate because they can't split up into odd numbers, where the DPS will be without support or the support will be without damage. Also, certain maps and objectives on those maps will favor different comps and roles or require those roles to react differently. The orientation of the nodes, what kind of terrain is there or isn't there. Also, certain maps and objectives on those maps will favor different comps and roles or require those roles to react differently, and the secondary objective will determine how each role should play. Because standing on a node constricts your movement and makes you an easier target, fights will often go on and off terrain depending on who is at an advantage or disadvantage. Duelists will often use terrain to survive outnumbered, or DPS will use it to give themselves sustain while their supports are not there. Supports will use terrain to maintain their cooldowns so that they can save them for their allies. In general, terrain is a counter to roamers as it slows down fights, but they can use it too. One of the most important things to learn is how to recognize the situation and when you're in a bad matchup, and how to play when that is the case. In other words, you want to rotate to the right place, but when that isn't possible, you need to minimize the value that the enemy gets out of it by either stalling for time or just not dying. More solutions will become available to you when you focus on surviving rather than trying to go toe-to-toe in every matchup. Check out my how to carry video, which will be linked below for that. For now, we're going to be talking about the support role, how to build it, and how to play it. Supports focus on sustaining fights and enable the other roles, more importantly the DPS, to play aggressively. In Guild Wars 2, you don't need to be a healer to be a support, but often support builds will want to heal to be optimal. You can support your allies with boons, resurrection, or it's stand on node, and then finally it's get kills. Notice how the life of the support is placed below the life of their team. They're very close in value because these two are very related. If your team dies, then you will die as a support. If you die, then your team will die as a support. So you need to find a balance of safe positioning and aggressive peeling to keep yourself and your team alive. If you play too safely and get split from your team, then they'll die. If you peel too aggressively and you take too much pressure, you may lose your life while you're out of cooldowns. Learning the ranges of your support abilities and staying near the threshold is very important to conserving your cooldowns as a support. If you're blowing all your cooldowns to heal yourself when your allies don't need it because you're standing too close to them, then you won't have the cooldowns available when your allies do need them. This means that supports who are very squishy